reasoning and argument to moral questions, we rejected this subjectivist outlook. The other assumption we rejected was that if there were a systematic moral theory, it would have to be some form of utilitarianism. We distrusted not only the content of that theory, but its form, which consisted of a single measure of the good, evaluated impartially for everyone, and subsidiary principles of rightness in conduct or of justice in institutions, whose validity depended entirely on their instrumental value in promoting the maximum amount of that impartial good. Instead, we were disposed to regard right and wrong as independent moral concepts, not definable in terms of a single, homogenizing standard of good and bad outcomes. We took moral intuitions about particular examples of conduct and policy seriously as a way to discover the often subtle principles determining right and wrong, justice and injustice, principles that limit the means that may be used to promote even the best ends. These convictions form the deep common element in the very disparate works that emerged from the group, such as Rawls' A Theory of Justice, Dworkin's Taking Rights Seriously, Walzer's Just and Unjust Wars, Thompson's A Defense of Abortion, and Nozick's Anarchy, State, and Utopia. In spite of strong disagreements, they were all engaged in a recognizably common project of investigating by common methods the true complexity of the moral realm. That said, Nozick's book presents a distinctive and radical position. He argues that the only legitimate state is a minimal state limited to the provision of security, the protection of property, and the enforcement of contracts, one that bears no resemblance to the modern welfare state with which we are familiar. His libertarianism rests on three claims. 1. The strict moral priority of a set of individual rights to freedom of action and association that limit what may be done to anyone by any other person or group. 2. The denial that there are any independent moral principles applying to collective or political institutions that cannot be derived from the natural rights of their individual members. And 3. The denial that there is a moral reason to mitigate social and economic inequality. Nozick's interpretation of the logic of rights as side constraints is of fundamental philosophical importance, whether or not one agrees that the specific rights he identifies have the absolute priority that he gave them. Formally, this aspect of morality assigns to each person an inviolability that prohibits others from treating him in certain ways: killing, injuring, coercing, expropriating, or defrauding him, except insofar as this may be necessary to prevent him from violating the same rights of others. Nozick emphasizes that it is not equivalent to counting the violation of such rights as a serious evil to be minimized, for that would justify the violation of rights to prevent greater violations by others. For example, committing one murder to prevent several other murders. Rights do not submit to such a calculus. They are boundaries around each innocent person that may not be crossed, even to prevent greater evils. As becomes clear from Nozick's detailed and ingenious discussion, the delineation of these rights and their limits, showing how it is possible for them to be accorded consistently to everyone, is a complex and subtle matter. He recognizes the difficulties of defining the scope and limits of legitimate self-defense, or of specifying the conditions of acceptable imposition of risk on others, together with principles of compensation as an alternative to coercive prohibition of activities that carry such risk. But whatever the details, his central thesis is clear. Each person has a strict moral right to act freely, as he chooses, without interference by others, so long as he does not violate the equal rights of anyone else. Nozick's conception of a free society follows if one takes this principle to provide the sole justification of coercion or force, for the state must employ coercion to enforce its laws and pursue its goals. If the freedom of individuals may not be interfered with without their consent, unless they violate or threaten to violate the same freedom of others, the coercive state cannot have goals that go beyond